Since the 19th century, changes have been registered in the diets of many populations around the world. Diet changes have been very evident since the 60s of the 20th century, related to the processes of modernization, particularly with food industrialization. The production and distribution of industrialized foods increased at an ever-increasing rate, as well as greater access of families to these industrial foods. At the same time that the consumption of industrial foods has been increasing in history, chronic diseases, also called Western diseases, such as obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, cancer, and so on, have been increasing. The first news we had of this relationship between industrial foods and Western diseases was in the first decades of the 20th century, thanks to a handful of European and American medical professionals who worked with a wide variety of indigenous populations around the world, populations that still had a traditional diet without industrial foods. These indigenous populations studied included American Indians, Labrador, Eskimos, Peruvian Indians, Australian Aborigines, and some populations in India and Africa. All these medical professionals sent the same news about the indigenous populations, observing that there was little or no heart disease, diabetes, cancer, obesity, hypertension or heart attack, no appendicitis, diverticulitis, dental malformations or cavities, no varicose veins, ulcers or hemorrhoids. In other words, chronic or Western diseases were practically non-existent in these populations. Several of these researchers were eyewitnesses to the arrival of Western diseases, which appeared with the arrival of Western industrial foods to these populations, particularly refined flour and sugar, and other types of storable foods. They also observed that when one Western disease appeared on the scene, so did the others, and often in the same order: first obesity, then type 2 diabetes, and then cardiovascular disease. The Western diet includes industrial foods with excess sugar, salt, and kilocalories. It also includes food substances not used in culinary preparations in particular, flavorings, colorings, sweeteners, emulsifiers, and other additives used to mimic sensory qualities of unprocessed or minimally processed foods and their culinary preparations, or to disguise undesirable qualities of the final product. In addition, industrial foods are often lacking in fiber, vitamins, and minerals, largely due to industrial processes such as the refining of cereals and oils. All these excesses and deficiencies of industrial foods cause nutritional imbalances in the diet. This Western diet has been associated with a notable increase in overweight and obesity rates in all age groups and in both sexes, as well as an increase in morbidity and mortality from chronic degenerative diseases. With globalization, this diet has practically reached the whole world today, so it makes no sense to call it a Western diet anymore. We know that indigenous people who come to developed countries and adopt our way of eating soon begin to suffer from chronic diseases. But we also know that this is reversible, as it has been seen that in individuals with obesity, type 2 diabetes, and hypertension who return to their indigenous people and their traditional diet, amazing improvements in virtually all health indicators were found in as little as 7 weeks, including lowered blood pressure, lowered blood glucose levels, and weight loss. Obviously, this improvement cannot happen as quickly in developed countries, since in addition to other factors such as stress, pollution, and sedentary lifestyles, it is difficult for us to obtain a traditional diet of natural foods. Industrial foods are everywhere in supermarkets, and in addition, intensive agriculture and livestock farming produce foods of poor nutritional quality. By using fertilizers and pesticides in intensive agriculture, and by using antibiotics, fattening hormones, and feeding with fattening feed in intensive livestock farming, we obtain food with residues and of poorer nutritional quality than the food obtained in a traditional diet with traditional agriculture and livestock farming. Intensive agriculture is less nutritious because fertilizers make the plant grow quickly, not giving it time to produce and accumulate sufficient phytonutrients. In addition, its soils are depleted of micronutrients due to repetitive use, the scarcity of organic matter, and the scarcity of beneficial microbes such as bacteria and fungi in symbiosis with plants. Intensive livestock farming is less nutritious because feed for fattening is not their natural diet, and this, in turn, comes from intensive agriculture. Intensively farmed animals have nutritional imbalances such as lack of micronutrients, excess of omega-6, and lack of omega-3, resulting in meat, milk, and eggs of poorer nutritional quality. As the food industry uses these intensively farmed foods in its ingredients and also refines a lot of these foods, adding excessive salt, sugars, additives, and so on, the results are unhealthy foods. It is recommended to consume foods as natural as possible, such as those from organic farming and organic livestock if possible, and that industrial foods consumed have no more than 5 ingredients, and that these ingredients have names that your great-grandmother could recognize, and if possible unrefined such as whole grains or extra virgin oils. Eliminate especially ultra-processed foods such as industrial pastries and industrial beverages such as soft drinks, energy drinks, and industrial juices. Unfortunately, the consumption of ultra-processed foods and beverages continues to increase today, and it is up to us as consumers to put pressure on the food industry to change this trend towards more natural and healthy foods. For those who think that chronic diseases are an irremediable consequence of old age, data show that as the consumption of industrial foods has increased in recent decades, chronic diseases have been appearing at younger ages, including some chronic diseases in children such as obesity and type 2 diabetes. Furthermore, if we only take into account age, for example people between 60 and 70 years old, the rates of chronic diseases in people of the same age are considerably higher today than they were in the year 1900. Finally, it should also be noted that indigenous populations with traditional diets, not being in developed areas, have lower life expectancy due to high mortality in childhood and adolescence, as was the case throughout the world centuries ago. But those who survive to these ages have a good chance of reaching 70 years old, and for those who reach these ages in indigenous populations with traditional diets, chronic diseases are rare, so that chronic diseases are not an irremediable consequence of age, as we have always been led to believe. The main conclusions of the video are: first, consumption of industrial foods is associated with chronic diseases. Second, in indigenous populations with traditional diets, chronic diseases are practically non-existent. Third, when either industrial foods reach these indigenous populations or indigenous individuals migrate to developed countries and acquire our diet with industrial products, chronic diseases begin to appear. Fourth, it is recommended to avoid ultra-processed foods and industrial beverages.